you have an idea. A real one, the kind that keeps you up at night. And before you've done a single thing about it, you tell someone. Maybe a friend, a partner, a colleague you trust. You lay it out. They listen carefully. And then they say something like, "That's incredible. You're going to make it happen." And for a moment, it feels like you already did. That feeling should alarm you. It doesn't. It feels like fuel. Like proof that the plan is real, that you are capable, that the path ahead is clear. You leave the conversation energized, motivated, ready to accept. You're not. The energy dissolves within hours. The plan goes back in the drawer. Days pass. Weeks. The idea is still there. Still vivid. Still compelling when you describe it to someone. New. But it hasn't moved. It is alive in conversation and dead everywhere else. You call this a discipline problem, a motivation problem, a courage problem. Carl Jung would call it something else entirely. Asterisk, the problem isn't that you don't want it badly enough. The problem is that some part of you has already had it, and that part doesn't know the difference between having it in reality and having it in the room. Jung understood the psyche as an energy system, not metaphorically, structurally. Libido, in his framework, is not sexual energy in the narrow Freudian sense. It is psychic energy in its broadest meaning, the force that drives thought, desire, creativity, and action. And like all energy systems, it obeys a fundamental law. Energy released in one direction is no longer available in another dot. What you spend here, you cannot spend there. The psyche is not a generator, it is a reservoir, and reservoirs can be drained long before the work begins. When you announce a plan and receive validation, something happens that feels indistinguishable from progress. The social reward, the nod, the enthusiasm, the wide eyes. The "I always knew you had it in you" activates the same psychological circuitry that responds to actual achievement. Your nervous system does not file these experiences in separate folders. It registers both as movement, both as arrival. The feeling of being seen as someone who is going to do something is neurologically adjacent to the feeling of having done it. Not identical, but close enough to deceive you. The productive tension that should have been accumulating, building pressure until it forced you into motion releases. Not catastrophically. Not all at once. Just enough that the urgency softens. Just enough that tomorrow feels reasonable. Just enough that the plan which yesterday felt like something you could not delay, today feels like something you are already handling. You mistake that softening for peace, for maturity, for confidence. You are not confident. You have discharged the energy that was supposed to move you. You collected the reward before doing the work. Asterisk, your own psychology is only half the problem. Because the moment you open your plan to the world, you don't just release your own energy. You step into someone else's interior, into the full, unexamined weight of everything they have never done, never tried, never allowed themselves to want. And what lies there will do something to your plan that no amount of personal discipline can undo. Jung's concept of the shadow is one of the most precise and uncomfortable ideas in all of psychology. The shadow is not evil. It is not dramatic. It is simply everything the psyche could not integrate, the desires abandoned, the risks never taken, the versions of the self that were suppressed because they were too threatening, too uncertain, too expensive to become. The shadow is the accumulated weight of a life half-lived, and it does not sit quietly. It projects. When you reveal an ambitious plan to someone, you trigger their shadow without either of you knowing it. The colleague who never left a job they hated The friend who had the same idea 5 years ago and didn't move. The parent who chose security and called it wisdom. They are not responding to your plan. They are responding to what your plan reminds them of, the version of themselves they decided at some point was not possible. And so the feedback arrives dressed as concern, dressed as experience, dressed as love. Is the timing really right? Translation: I never found the right time, and I made peace with that by deciding there isn't one. That's a huge risk. Translation: I couldn't tolerate that kind of uncertainty, and I've spent years convincing myself that was the reasonable position. Are you sure you've thought this through? Translation: I thought mine through until I thought it to death, and I need to believe that was thorough, not cowardly. Every question, every hesitation, every gentle redirect dot is shadow material, not wisdom. The person delivering it may be entirely sincere. Sincerity does not make it less dangerous. It makes it more. Because you trust them. And because you trust them, you absorb it. Your plan exits that conversation slightly different from how it entered. A hairline fracture in the foundation. Invisible at the time. Decisive later. Asterisk assume for a moment the best possible scenario. The person you tell has no unresolved wounds, no buried ambitions, no shadow pressing against the walls of the conversation. They are genuinely, cleanly happy for you. They want this for you as much as you want it for yourself. They listen carefully, ask good questions, offer only the kind of input that comes from real intelligence and real affection. This is the conversation you were hoping for, and it will still damage your plan. A good friend asks a question you hadn't considered a practical one, a fair one, and you begin to factor it in. Someone you respect raises a concern about timing. Another suggests a different angle. None of this is wrong. All of it is reasonable, and gradually almost the plan that was entirely yours begins to incorporate the logic, the fears, the risk tolerance of people who are not you and will not live the consequences of what you build. You don't notice the shift because each individual input seems minor, helpful even. But the accumulation is not. Minor. The plan that survives 3 months of well-intentioned conversation is rarely the plan that was conceived in silence. It is a negotiated version, smoothed at the edges, adjusted for comprehensibility, stripped of whatever was most idiosyncratic and therefore most alive, has been made more legible to others at the cost of becoming less true to you. Jung called this the pull toward the persona, this acceptable surface that forms in response to what the environment can tolerate. When your plan undergoes the same editing process, shaped by the implicit question of what others can understand and approve, it becomes a persona of itself, a presentable version, a plan that no longer frightens anyone, including you, which means it no longer carries the charge it was built on. Asterisk, consider what happens when you stop announcing and simply begin. The internal pressure that was finding release through conversation has nowhere to go but into action. The energy that was being discharged in the form of social reward accumulates instead. An accumulated pressure with no verbal outlet reorganizes the psyche around the only thing left to do. The unconscious, no longer enlisted in the maintenance of a social narrative, redirects entirely toward execution. The plan stops being a story you tell and becomes a reality you build. Jung used the language of gestation deliberately. The psyche does not produce its most important contents on demand. It ripens on a plan that comes from genuine depth, from vocation, from the self, from whatever part of you knows what it is actually for. Begins not as a strategy, but as an intuition, a pressure, a direction that hasn't yet acquired language. In this state, it is real, but It is not yet durable. It has no skeleton. It cannot defend itself against the weight of an external perspective, however well-meaning, because it hasn't yet developed the internal coherence that would allow it to remain itself under pressure. Exposing it at this stage is not courageous. It is premature. And prematurity in psychological gestation, as in biological gestation, is not a minor inconvenience. It is a threat to survival. Silence is not absence. It is the most productive environment the psyche has access to, the only one in which something genuinely new can complete its formation before the world gets to decide whether it deserves to exist. The silence is not waiting. It is working. Asterisk the individual who cannot act without an audience has not yet fully separated from the collective. They are stew in the deepest psychological meaning of the word, waiting to be told who they are. You know if this is you, not because you are weak, because the evidence is in the drawer. In every plan that is vivid in conversation and motionless in reality. In every year that passes with the dream intact and the distance unchanged. The answer to that question is not something to share. It is something to act on. Alone in the silence that is not absence, but gestation, the dark, where things that are meant to live go, to develop the structure they need to survive the light. Leave in the comments, not the plan. The recognition. That is where the work begins.